feeding on my tension. My countrymen, they love their fiction. The words are now, it's made with good intentions.
Welcome to 1 of 200, the Politics and Media podcast, where we bring you the news about what's been happening in the week just gone. It is Saturday morning, 2 days after Waitangi. I'm joined by my co-hosts. Oliver, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. How you doing?
I'm great. And Josephine, welcome back.
Yoda, thanks for having me back.
All right. So, the United States is looking insane. You know, this stuff is always bad. I think it's really important to understand the baseline of US empire as being incredibly destructive to the rest of the world. And we've talked about, you know, imperial boomerang kind of stuff, you know, the horrible shit that they do outside of the US, returning home. Often it's talked about in terms of violence, so returning service people or political groups undertaking political violence within the US. But what we're actually seeing with, do we say the ascendancy of Trump? I don't think so. That sounds a bit too
It's letting them use their own terminology.
with Trump coming into power and unleashing his minions. Is this destruction of the administrative state that you've seen in places that they coup, right? And there's been a lot of noise about it. It is looking pretty horrific in terms of just the speed at which some of this stuff has been able to happen. I don't know, are we accelerationists on this call? I tend not to be an accelerationist, but I think one of our other co-hosts was saying on Twitter a week or so ago, Finlay, you know, like, whether you're an acceleration or not, acceleration is kind of happening right now. And there are a bunch of accelerationists in power. The question is, what do we do with that?
I don't even know if it's necessarily an accelerationist position to be kind of broadly okay with the sort of humiliation and potential collapse of the United States. I think there's certainly in a bit of a state of things. It's being a bit of a foxes in charge of the hen house situation, and they're just kind of going nuts. But yeah, we can. I'd love to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, I had a friend whose name I won't disclose who said to me the other day that, you know, we must protect Trump. We shouldn't allow him to die because it looks like the death of the US empire is imminent.
Yeah,
I mean, it's fascinating because, you know, it's on the one hand, it's very scary. It's a huge disruption of norms. A lot of lovely American civilians are undergoing some entirely new pressures that they've never had to deal with. The part that I'm very disturbed about is the new approach to immigration enforcement. They've got ICE agents showing up, knocking on people's doors, saying, we would like you to dob in your neighbors, real like Third Reich type stuff. And they've clearly decided that for our Reich, the immigrants are going to be our chosen first group of people that we target.
Oh, don't forget trans people.
Yeah. So they're finding their sort of minority groups that they've got sufficient permission to brutally oppress. Because there's a difference. There's Americans going, oh, I've lost access to the handy tax service. That's annoying. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, it's annoying that these like services are being stripped. But there are people who are literally just being dragged off into concentration camps right now because Guantanamo Bay is being rapidly converted into a concentration camp, and they're rounding up immigrants. They've already taken the first boatload there. So there are concentration camps in America, and there have been for quite some time because they were there under the Biden administration. And people don't like to talk about it. People are like, oh, you can't call them concentration camps, despite the fact that they're in every respect exactly the same as a concentration
I mean, let's
camp.
talk about the US prison system, right?
But I mean these are bad. These are completely unaccountable internment facilities that they're keeping immigrants in, where people go missing constantly, especially children go missing constantly. People die in these cases. The cases are not being investigated. People are thrown into trucks and just shipped across the border and just dumped on the side of the road. It is a really, really bad situation in the American immigration system right now.
And they are making videos of all this cruelty. They're making videos and making promotional stuff. Look at what we're doing. We're rounding up people. I mean, just recently, a plane of around 120, migrants from India sent all across the world to India in a US military plane with their hands and their feet tied up together with one toilet in this massive military aircraft. And then, they landed in the state of Punjab. And I was so it was refreshing to see the responses from other countries like Nicaragua, who said we might be reconsidering the U.S. military base here, which is sitting here, and we're not being paid anything for this, occupation of a foreign military here. So we might be rethinking that. And of course, excellent responses from, other leaders in other parts of Latin America. But the right-wing Indian government, do you know what their response was? Obviously, there was, furor in India's parliament around this, especially the opposition, opposing the way that Indians were treated. But then the Modi government's foreign affairs minister, gets up and says, we think it's kind of standard procedure on how to on when people are being deported for being illegal immigrants. So what I see there is an anti-immigrant, right-wing government in India, kind of like, this is what we want to do to the migrants in India from Bangladesh and from, the surrounding regions. And, it's like, yeah, it was really disappointing. And I'm just so tempted to create a meme with, the Virgin Indian government and the Chad Nicaraguan government. But you can see what is being normalized for right-wing governments across the world through these images and through these horrific practices that we are seeing now.
Yeah, and it's not just going to be immigrants. Like, we can already see the testing ground where they brokered and announced, Marco Rubio brokered that deal and has just announced that El Salvador is going to start receiving American domestic prisoners as well. So they've said, we'll take some of your prisoners and we'll just put them into basically just this giant, like, Thunderdome that we've been building in El Salvador. It's gotten a lot of coverage, this mega prison that they've built out in El Salvador, and it's widely reported on some of the worst prison conditions on the planet. And everyone, has, with a sort of lick of sense, has been saying, hey, this is a massive human rights abuse. But the tough on crime guys have gone like, oh, well, they were in a gang, so they deserve to be locked into this like hell cage forever. And now they've said, hey, we'll just start sending Americans there, American civilians, American citizens specifically, just getting deported, whatever that means anymore, to El Salvador to spend their term in these foreign mega prisons. So I front foot this because I'm hesitant that there's that kind of like, that like, oh my God, are these guys like secretly doing cool stuff because they're undermining the deep state? But it's like, not in any meaningful sense. Like, they've accidentally created a bunch of chaotic problems that are hurting Americans' foreign policy, but they will ultimately rebuild it. They're just going to rebuild it with less accountability. Because you look at the USAID stuff, like USAID, people have been going, oh, this is so awful. This is they're sort of destroying USAID, and this is a really important program that helps feed the world. The notable thing that you're not hearing from is no country complaining about USAID leaving their country. No one. There hasn't been a single briefing or like announcement from any government going, hey, we desperately needed this, can you stay? Because most countries are like, oh, okay, yeah, you weren't really helping. The aid never reached our people. You weren't doing much. And in fact, we were concerned about the fact that you were funding right-wing populist media in our country instead, which is what's just been exposed in Ukraine. They were funding the pro-war news outlets to try and prevent any kind of peace deal ever being brokered there.
Yeah, the one place I'm seeing a lot of kind of concern come out of in regards to the USAID stuff is very clear information ops, right? People who are like, oh, my funding. Oh, how do I prop up my little fucking psyop business?
A ton of like people were just like not even realizing how transparently bad it looks. We're like, hey, I'm a writer living in China, and I've been writing about how China's on the verge of collapse for the last 20 years. Who's going to fund that with USAID gone? They don't realize, like, hey, guys, you're not supposed to be saying this stuff out loud. Like, did your handlers not tell you this? I guess they've all lost their jobs, so they're just kind of running fast and loose and not really thinking about OPSEC anymore. But it's, but the thing is, a couple of days ago, like some guy was like, look at Elon, he's so based, he's undermining these international things. And Elon retweeted it with, wow, because he didn't know. Like, this is the really important thing to understand. They're not doing some kind of cool anti-imperialist thing. They're literally just plundering the United States government to steal money and steal information and they're accidentally undermining America's foreign policy aims at the same time and getting caught off guard doing that, because they're not good guys. They're nasty pieces of shit, but they've accidentally done a couple of things that might make a few countries a bit more safe and stable.
Yeah, I think like one thing to keep in mind is that their model of foreign policy, while I think still being focused on US primacy, right? Despite Marco Rubio coming out early in the week or late last week to talk about multipolarity, they want to maintain hegemony. Like this is just a core thing about the US state, right? They want to crush people. But what we're seeing is a shift from soft power to harder power, I would argue. So getting rid of some of the USAID stuff, they don't really give a shit. What they're doing is grabbing as much resources as they can, and then looking to work with like-minded partners. So like Bukele in El Salvador. Javier Milei in Argentina is also lining up for some of this stuff. Just some of the worst, like most hawkish, radical, neoliberal, pseudo-fash groups around who they can align to start really pushing some horrible trash.
No, we don't need to call it pseudo-fascist anymore, do we? Like it's can
Oh
we?
no, yeah, I mean, absolutely.
We don't have to talk carefully about this anymore. Like we were like trying to be like, oh, we don't want to be accused of being hysterical by using the word fascist, but this is what
this is fascist. Yeah, absolutely. But I think like there's a scale there as well, right? Like there are people who have not given full-throated support, who have not implemented these things in their countries just yet, who are also starting to get on board. And the other thing to keep in mind is, and the way I've been describing this on Twitter is, there's all this crazy stuff happening, right? Like sending the Doge kids into parts of US administration to plug in laptops and steal data and like shut things down.
Well, that's the other crazy thing is like it's been pointed out multiple times. They don't have any mandate to do any of this. But for some reason, departments are just kind of going, I don't really
it's just
know.
learned helplessness,
I don't
right?
know enough
Like,
to
I don't want to
stop
get
them.
fired. The bureaucracy says I have to.
I'm scared of getting punished by the executive, I guess. Like that to me is what makes this sort of like, no, this is just fascism, because these guys are just running amok. They are completely doing it in defiance of American law, of American constitutional structure. And no one seems to be brave enough to be like, oh, actually, that's not entirely true. A couple of them, the Department of Labor was like, actually, we do know that you're not allowed to be in here. So they've taken them to court. And so we're actually barring you from the premises.
That's not going to do much, unfortunately.
We'll see. But it is funny to see at least one department go, hey, you're actually not allowed to be here. Like,
got to show there's an off case, right? Like there's a counter case to people saying, "Oh, we just have to," right? So we've seen an example of it, but this is why I'm describing it as a constitutional coup.
They've established a precedent of, hey, by the way, you can say no to these guys.
Yeah, exactly.
But then I don't know, maybe they've already folded. I don't know. I haven't checked the news this morning. But that's the thing is the fact that someone is able to properly identify the problem and point it out makes the fact that nobody else is doing that so much worse.
Kind of like Guy Williams talking to David Seymour yesterday,
just breaking through and being like, why is this fucking comedian the only one talking about it?
Yeah, pretty crazy.
For context, Guy Williams confronted our deputy PM.
With the US stuff, as an anti-imperialist, for me, this moment is quite interesting because it's become, again, it's become more acceptable to be very overly critical of the United States. I feel like I was, often on my own or, in a minority when I spoke about, for example, U.S. role in instigating the Ukraine war, U.S. role in so many things across the world. There was an establishment position, which was, in fact, the liberal position, the liberal left position as well. The USA's, for example, interference in Iran over since 1953's coup and how that has an impact in today's politics over there. I mean, the Green Party in New Zealand took a pro-US stance when it came to, Iranian foreign policy. But when Trump, somebody as vulgar as Trump comes into power, it becomes USA's, a role in just destabilizing the entire world. And the fact that it is, in fact, the head of the global imperial system, which so many global South communists and anti-colonial leaders identified as the biggest roadblock to people's liberation across the world. Now, more and more people are seeing this. This is a great thing in my view. With Ali Abu Nima, for example, the Palestinian journalist from Electronic Intifada. He was recently arrested by the Swiss police. Imagine that, the so-called neutral country in the world arresting a journalist for no reason.
Huge quote marks around neutral.
Yeah.
They've had it too good for too long. I'll go into that
Well,
later.
they were neutral to the Nazis, which, we know what neutrality means in the face of Nazism. Um, so yeah, so this is becoming normal, and many liberals are waking up to this. Actually, USA has a bigger role in the starting of the Ukraine war than we thought it did. So that's all good. And the other side is also, sometimes I watch these crazy, US business channels like what are they, CNBC, some of those stuff where they're just talking some sort of weird stuff about, they have no connection to reality, and they're talking about, yeah, things are getting better for the economy, or things are getting worse, without any connection to the ground realities. And they were panicking about the United States. They were panicking about Trump. They were saying, we don't know where Trump is going on the Fed's monetary policy. Do you have any predictions? And the expert goes, going by Trump 1.0, the only prediction I can give is that he will go by the last person that spoke to him. Trump's unpredictability is throwing the empire into chaos. So Ali Abu Nima, for example, recently said, Biden does the same stuff as Trump, but Trump says it openly for everyone to see, which is actually, a benefit for, the anti-imperialist movement, because we can point it out quite clearly.
Yeah, there's no plausible deniability, right? And for people to go, oh, they don't really mean it. Oh, no, but he's saying it's actually good, so he can't be doing it for real. Like, especially this was brought into incredibly stark relief and started to create these cracks for Trump to kind of seep into under the Biden's genocide in Palestine, right?
Well, that's the thing, because Trump unilaterally announces the US is going to invade and permanently occupy Gaza. So he's like, this is it. We're going to turn it into a giant real estate project. And all of a sudden, people who have broadly supported the genocide of Palestinians for the last few years, explicitly been like, this is all good and fine, have suddenly piped up and gone, wait a second, this isn't okay. Like, I hate this in some ways, because it's kind of almost like weaponized campism, but it's given, I guess, an opportunity for some of the sort of Quislings and the Holocaust collaborators, the genocide supporters, to sort of subtly rebrand themselves as anti-genocide, because now it's Trump doing it. It was the same with sort of the George Floyd protesting and the BLM stuff. But when it was Trump, it gave an opportunity for the cowards and the shitheads to get on board without having to sort of admit fault. Which I don't love, but I'll fucking take it if it's about building a consensus on these things.
Yeah, I mean, then there's the other group, which is like still screaming at, left-wing voters that it's their fault. They hope Trump genocides them, right? Like, and among these people are like highly paid media executives, right? Like, and the like. This is absolute
like
freaks.
Voting matters, guys. I'm like, does it actually though? Because actually, for all his bullshit that he said, that Trump said, he still negotiated a ceasefire that has stopped not stopped, but greatly slowed down the bombing campaign in Gaza. And basically created that opportunity for a massive exchange of hostages, where Palestinian hostages, the thousands of Palestinian hostages, were released and returned to their family. Now, that's not in any way a point towards Trump. It was pure cynicism. It was just a way to get one leg up over Joe Biden. But the thing is, like, ultimately, your vote didn't matter if your issue was Palestine, if your issue was Gaza and the West Bank. It didn't matter because you could vote for Donald Trump, who's going to say out loud, hey, I'm going to do all this horrible shit. Or you could vote for Joe Biden, who would go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying my best, while
No,
carrying
he wouldn't
out
be
a
that
genocide.
coherent. What are you talking about, Oliver?
Because that was their whole, Kamala's whole thing was, oh, we're doing our best, we're trying our hardest, but Israel has a right to defend itself, and we will continue to send them weapons. Like, there was never any
Evil.
ambiguity about Kamala's position on Israel. It was, the genocide will continue, and we will fully support whatever they want to do, and we will defer to them no matter what.
Yeah,
That was the official position of that campaign. They didn't campaign on ending the genocide. So when people are like, oh, I hope you're happy Palestinians get fucked, it's like, well, they got fucked either way. And that's actually part of why they lost the election. 30% of American non-voters said their primary reason for not voting was the genocide in Palestine. 30%.
finally,
Mm.
and I think it was like the foulness of some of these people to throw rocks at those voters finally gives the lie to the way in which the Democrats or other big parties like the Uni Party in every country, in every Western country, blames individual voters for the crimes that occur at the top.
Yeah.
Because
it's an incredible canard.
it's so foul. It's like
Well,
you can't do it. Come on, the Democrats could have just voted, like tried to win votes. You know, that's
They
the
could have.
fucking
I
job.
don't even know if they wanted to.
Well,
I wonder if they wanted to. They sent Bill Clinton into one of the largest Muslim communities in America,
to
and
say
Bill
fuck
Clinton
you.
said, "Fuck you and die." They were campaigning with Liz Cheney,
oh wow. Do you
the woman,
remember?
she's married to the butcher of Iraq. What were you? Who were you going to win there?
It's the daughter. Um,
Sorry, yeah.
yeah. It's crazy because her response to the Palestine protesters was like, "If you want Trump to win, just say that. I'm speaking now. I'm speaking." Yeah, that became like the death knell for her campaign. Yeah, and earlier I think I said Nicaragua. It's actually Honduras that threatened to expel U.S. military base from their soil, as a response to the treatment of the migrants. And um, the US aid thing, Kyle, you mentioned it's a shift from soft power to hard power, and it may not make a difference, but I think it does, because I think if you look at the history of 400 years of colonialism, Western colonialism and neocolonialism, however you want to call it, after World War II, it has relied heavily on the ideological apparatus, on the soft power. It's always been, we are spreading human rights, democracy. Look at us, we have a superior system. Let's teach you how to run your countries and so forth. So,
We're
um,
sending Tony Blair.
so yeah, the derailing of that funding is a huge blow to the empire because they can't stand up just on hard power. They couldn't even defeat Hamas, who don't even have, they don't have an air force, they don't have an arm, a navy,
They don't have a
they don't
state.
have they don't have killer robots. So, look at the Vietnam, like just with hard power they can't conquer, but with the soft power that's how they have done it for 400 years. The Western ruling class have used that, and that crumbling is the death knell to the empire, in my view. Yep.
But I think, yeah, to sort of temper what I said earlier about how it's sort of accidentally a good thing that they've undermined their own soft power program, I don't think USAID is gone in any meaningful sense. I think either USAID will be sort of rebuilt and restructured, but with less financial oversight, because once they sort of get a handle on what it is that they've done, they'll go, whoopsie doopsie, we need to rebuild this. Or alternatively, they'll build the Department of Epic Memes, or whatever they're going to call it. And they're just going to send that thing $8 trillion a year, which Elon will skim a whole bunch off the top in order to help pay down his debts.
And it just beam stuff from his satellite straight into people's brains.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They'll just rebuild a new soft power network that will continue to do what it does. But there's no way that they are sort of withdrawing from their soft power program. They're just restructuring it to have less oversight and less accountability.
Yeah, I want to be clear as well. Like, there's a second thread to this, right? There's what's happening with primacy, hegemony, at home with the administrative state and the constitutional coup. But we also have to keep in mind that fascism aside, which is something that you don't usually say, there are a whole bunch of these rabid ideologues that are seizing power at the moment within the billionaire oligarchy, right? Who have these really absurd ideas around, the seasteading movement and special economic zones and free states.
Long-termism,
Yeah, that kind of shit.
the
Where,
breeding program.
yeah, like just this
They're
really
weird
bizarre
freaks.
stuff.
Yeah, Peter Thiel
Um,
types.
yeah, which is why like Bukele in El Salvador is like getting on board, why Malaya is getting on board. They're really interested in creating these spaces where there's just no fucking law. And I
Or,
think
or the law is what we want, and it's because I've kind of touched on this in the past, but it's very clear to me that a lot of governments and politicians have been essentially briefed on climate change and have decided, okay, the solution to this is going to be totalitarian fascism. Because you look at the way that America has been responding to the challenges of the age under both types of governance, and this like constant upscaling and militarization of their police force. Just recently, some like Democratic governor just announced like, "Hey, I've just canceled this massive public housing project. We don't need that. We're going to build a new police training facility. They're building another cop city." And people are obviously outraged by this. They're like, this was supposed to be housing for poor people, and now instead you're building a military facility for training more police officers. And it's like, we don't need these. They're not reducing crime in any meaningful sense. What is the purpose of all of this? And the long-term answer, and the answer that a lot of these other guys, these Peter Thiel types who have their little hidey hole bunkers here in New Zealand, they're preparing for the collapse of the world, of the civilized world. They're preparing for all of these norms and rights and societies, these happy societies, to fall to bits, and they're lining themselves up with these little basically private militaries so that they can be warlords.
we can have a little fiefdom.
Yeah, and it's not going to work because they're all narcissistic lunatic shitheads, and so even if they like perfectly execute their plan, they will just be warring with each other immediately in the aftermath. They'll be fighting to see who gets to be controlled over what elements of the sort of fallen kingdom. But this is the thing with that, they are talking about this stuff behind closed doors. They're absolutely talking about just like carving the world up to be theirs and theirs alone. And you can hear it when you see these like Sam Altman types and Elon Musk, when they're doing their little interviews, they drop these little hints into the conversation about how they see the future. Sam Altman in an interview recently was talking about how like we're just going to have to radically start rethinking this way that we're structuring our societies. Like maybe we shouldn't have all these sort of rights and freedoms. And he's just kind of casually throwing this out because he's in that sort of inner circle,
and he thinks
he's
it's normal
in those rooms, and those are the conversations that he's having. Is like, we need to start reimagining the world as a giant permanent prison of which we are going to be the controllers. So if that's the conversations that they're having, and they're not having them with you, they're having them with each other, you should be sort of mentally and probably materially preparing yourself for that eventuality. If you're an American, I don't know, it's probably not going to be quite so bad outside of America. Maybe it will be, maybe it'll be a nightmare, but it's very clear that that's the long-term goal of all these guys in America. It's clearly what they want to do with that landmass, and it's pretty scary.
In the midst of all this upheaval, where does New Zealand stand? Like, what's New Zealand's response? What's New Zealand's response to this crazy, the stuff that are happening in the United States? And recently, Ted Cruz tweeting about, New Zealand is,
God, I wish we were that cool.
Chasing out Israeli soldiers or something.
I wish that we were chasing down IDF soldiers in New Zealand and locking them up. We're not nearly that cool.
Well, yeah, that's the campaign that PSNA, sort of proposed, started, and then we see our Foreign Affairs Minister, Winston Peters, just going under that tweet and saying, sorry, no, that's not us. No, that was false news. David Seymour
we would never arrest a war criminal.
Yeah, we will never arrest a war criminal. So that's where we stand. Like our government is just like sucking up to the empire. But I was really happy to see that, one of the activist campaigns instigated a thought in major Zionists in the United States that maybe New Zealand isn't a great ally of genocide.
I'll take that. Yeah, even if it's completely false, I'll take it.
This is the thing, like this is why it's so important to watch what's happening in the United States, to understand what they're trying to do and what the goals of some of these like incredibly powerful men are, right? Because we are seeing threads of that land in New Zealand. You mentioned Peter Thiel, New Zealand citizen, has his own shit here, comes and visits with reasonable frequency. I was talking about special economic zones and free states. That's a ACT Party policy, like to
That's
have
what they
special
want to do.
economic
Yeah, they
zones.
want to do that here.
They want to do
they
that in
want New
Hawke's
Zealand to do
Bay
that.
after the
Yeah.
cyclone. They want to create these like free ports, these spaces where there's basically no regulations and no law. They want to remove regulations from public services. They want to get rid of public services altogether, really. Like, let's be frank, and contract that out to private companies.
Yeah, the
And
media's soft treatment of ACT is just deplorable, despicable.
Well, no, he's been recently engaged, though. That's what's important, is that he got engaged and then he announced his engagement in order to bury a story about him aiding and abetting a pedophile. Which is like, imagine that's the love of your life. Like, imagine falling in love with a guy who uses your engagement announcement as squid ink to hide the fact that he helped a man rape kids.
Just horrific. And just the treatment of, for example, Green Party former MPs uh, and ACT, big leaders in ACT, it's so clear to the eye, the double standard in media. It's pathetic. I think ACT has a lot of, deep relations with key people in major media in New
Well, the NZ
Zealand.
initiative, right?
Yeah.
Owner of
And
Stuff is a member of a right-wing think tank that is in direct cooperation with the ACT Party. I think that's a problem.
it's been horrific. The coverage of Waitangi Day has been horrific. Prime Minister so pathetically avoiding Waitangi and going to Akaroa in Canterbury, and then in the marae. I mean, he thought he's going to escape, but also, a big ups to my comrades at PSNA who disrupted him. And asked him the question of New Zealand's obligations under the Genocide Convention. And then we see the media covering it completely differently. They said the protesters were hurling slurs. There were no slurs hurled at him. It's just the media is openly we've been doing marches, anti-genocide marches for the last 14 months. None of it is covered by the media. When we do get covered, they just malign us. It's pathetic. New Zealand media is pathetic.
And what's crazy is no one's falling for it. That's been kind of the mind-blowing thing, because we've seen over the last 10 years now kind of a collapse in trust in traditional media, and their response to that has just been basically like a tantrum. It's just been like, oh, why don't you trust us? Oh, we're doing such important work. And it's like, when, where has been your solidarity as Israel has killed more journalists than any other nation in history in a single year than all of history prior?
Yep. And more journalists were killed in Gaza than in the Second World War, the whole of the Second World War.
It's insane. Like, where are your statements? Where are you speaking out? Why are you not standing up to your bosses? Is the editorial line really that powerful that you just can't say a word? And if you can't say a word in your work, why are you not taking a moral stance? Why are you not going onto your social media and pointing it out or blowing the whistle on this stuff? Like, where are your voices? What are you doing?
And the media is a key pillar to this creating this ideological infrastructure where it's just normalized. Like, why is it that none of the New Zealand universities have made a statement about every university in Gaza being destroyed? Not a single university is making a statement. We even saw the controlled detonation of an entire campus, and it was the students protesting that were being, threatened with punishment and suspension instead of, being a critic and conscience of society. And the media is playing a critical role in allowing and normalizing that sort of a complicity from all our institutions, which we look up to in these sorts of moments.
Yeah, I think it's really important to think around the way things are being covered in New Zealand, the lack of accountability for the right-wing political parties, and how that plays into like these nationhood narratives, right? So to swing back to Waitangi Day, you can go back and look like 6 months back, even longer, around the way in which New Zealand First and Shane Jones were keen to take eyes off Waitangi Day as a day of national unity, essentially. And the media here just kind of fall in line on that. I I'm really struggling to see any value in most of our media coverage at this point around this stuff.
Which is a shame because the collapse of this means that people are sort of increasingly falling into niche informational communities instead. And
Mm.
I mean, in some ways it's like people sort of, there's a small, unfortunately not most people are sort of falling back on like sort of doing their own research, but like essentially trying to investigate things on their own terms. But what they're doing is they're getting sort of corralled into these sort of nonsense things, these alternative media sources like reality check radio or the platform, or these sort of bloggers who are just doing the same thing the mainstream media is doing, but they're doing it with a veneer of anti-establishment politic. But
That's
they're all
right.
being funded by American backers. They're all being funded by right-wing lobby groups. So they have all the same problems, except they're almost unfettered, and they're pretending they're making the sort of overtures to being in some way sort of anti-establishment, despite reflecting the exact views of the establishment in every respect.
Yeah.
Mm.
It was like the Parliament protests, like I had a couple of like sort of activisty mates who kind of didn't understand why I just didn't fuck with the Parliament protests. It was the exact same problem. It was just a bunch of people who were reasonably upset about a reasonably frustrating situation, but just got completely corralled into this insane right-wing hysteria.
Living in a country like New Zealand, from your childhood, uh, there's certain explanations about, what works and what doesn't, and how the establishment is there to protect us, or the institutions and the government and so forth. And this idea has broken down because people's lives are getting worse and worse. There's no explanation from the establishment as to why this is happening, and so
It's
people are looking.
immigrants, Josephine. I think you'll find it's immigrants.
Even when it was the Bears.
And so, yeah, people are looking to other explanations. And so, um, to be honest, like if you think about, neoliberal free market ideology, it's not far from conspiracy theory, right? The idea that, for example, Western nations like United States and all these other Western European countries are, the purveyors of human rights and international law. These are worse than QAnon conspiracies. So you can't really blame anyone for believing in QAnon conspiracies. And the thing is, the West, especially since World War II and the advent of Cold War, has been so invested in destroying any sort of left-wing alternative socialist ideologies from being accepted, that it has provided a thriving ground for fascism and fascistic sort of explanations and conspiracies. So if you are, a person growing up in this sort of an ideological ideological scenario, then you're more likely to become a fascist and identify, for example, as a Nazi, even if you're black, than actually becoming, a left-wing sort of critic of it. So look at the United States and the West. They fund fascism to oppose any threat to their empire across the world, right? At the moment, just today we saw an article from Mick Hall. It was released yesterday, talking about how NATO, like you said, Ollie, like US aid. I don't know if you said it, Kyle or Ollie. It hasn't really been completely removed from the scene because there's, the ideological apparatus of the US empire still lives on through other things, right? Through, for example, NATO funding, certain cultural things across the Pacific and across the world. US has other apparatuses like, the State Department. Um, EU does a lot of stuff like that. EU funds a lot of research against China, even in the in my university. It's really funny to see what the US State Department funds, what kind of research, because you can see what they're funding, and you can tell where they want to do a regime change just by looking at the funding that they're doing. I think I lost train of thought there, but yeah, this is what we're seeing, that if you are living in this sort of an ideological scenario, you're more likely to become right-wing extremist than actually challenge the system through sort of like leftist critiques.
Building worker power, disestablishing imperial power. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Instead,
yeah,
you're just like, I don't know, taking a gun to an abortion clinic, because that's the sort of like that's where they're trying to funnel people is
yeah.
into nonsense rather than and because that's the other thing is like this is the story that sort of has been driving me crazy since it blew up last year. But the US government is also funding these conspiracy theory groups directly. They're actually building them out themselves. Like they got caught in 2020 running like hundreds of social media accounts in the Philippines that were basically existing purely to spread misinformation and fear around the Chinese vaccine. So the whole purpose of it was, as
was
pathetic and
anti-vax.
insane as it sounds, basically just promoting the American vaccine, but also like trying to undermine sort of Chinese soft power, because they didn't want China's Sinovac to be sort of like a success story. And so they ran this massive propaganda campaign in the Philippines to try and basically frighten people away from getting Sinovac and towards the American one as a soft power move to try and make people go, oh, well, yeah, okay, I guess China good, China bad, America good. And so they were actively spreading COVID disinformation and vaccine disinformation. This was the US government, the Pentagon, literally paying for that. And this is not like it sounds crazy. It sounds like something like 20 years ago, you'd be like, no way, that's a 9/11 tier conspiracy theory, but it's just a factual thing that has been reported on in Reuters. It blows the mind. Of course, people are going to fall into conspiratorial thinking in a time where the government is engaging in conspiratorial activity in plain sight.
I'll add one more thing to this discussion. It's that, I don't know where I read this, but um, it was someone saying that look at the United States response to, for example, the Black Panther Party or any radical communist movement in the United States. They completely, crush it. Black Panther Party doesn't exist in any form as it did in the 60s today, but KKK still lives on. There
Well,
you go.
this is important, right? Like, because it's not just individuals that are driven in this direction; it's institutions, and not to the same
Absolutely.
extremes immediately, but they're shifting that direction, and that's why we have media who are just happy to play nice, as political parties, political leaders, business leaders become more fascistic, and become outright fascist, and that comes back to like how Waitangi was reported again, like. David Seymour got up with his own microphone, like baited controversy, kept talking, put the video up on the Act YouTube, and then media ran to him in droves to get his side of the story.
I did love that clip of that dude just walking off with his mic, though. That was pretty.
Well, this is the thing. Like,
Love that shit.
that should also have been recorded. Like, if the media was really just like the objective fucking observer that it says it is, everything would have been captured, but it wasn't. They're running to David Seymour. They're getting down on their hands and knees with to lick that boot. And then the same with Shane Jones. They just followed up with Shane Jones again.
Yeah, we're in this sort of like degradation of what we consider to be tolerable politician behavior, because what David Seymour did would be widely decried as deeply pathetic and inappropriate in the past. It was the sort of thing that you would have said that's completely unacceptable. It would have been a career-ending mistake. And that's the thing, is we're watching routinely politicians do things that should be ending their careers because of how despicable and ridiculous they are, and it just doesn't end careers like it used to. And you know, the nonsense at Waitangi is a perfect example of that. The fact that David Seymour helped hide a pedophile, which is a thing that we haven't really talked about much on this episode, but you know, obviously Tim Jago lost his name suppression, and we can finally all just talk about how the president of the ACT party was a child molester. And what's not being reported on is the fact that David Seymour, when he learned of this, tried to hide it, tried to cover it up. When the victim had sort of reported it to the party, David Seymour's method was, I would like you to speak to our employment lawyer, and tried to trick them basically into losing any opportunity to actually get their justice of any kind. So he was working very, very hard to cover up the crimes of a child molester. He should have resigned by now. And if it was 10, 15 years ago, he would have resigned in disgrace. And you look at like the way that other politicians who've been embroiled in little scandals like Golriz or Matiria
Yeah.
Ture have been embroiled in these things and have done the honourable, respectable thing of just stepping down and leaving. But not David Seymour, not accessory to child molestation David Seymour is just escaping it because there's no media frenzy. It's not destroying his career the way it would have years ago. And these are the times that we live in now.
And aside from, the horrible personal failures and crimes of these, the leaders of this of ACT Party, let's talk about the failure of their policies. Like things are getting worse and worse. I mean, National came into power, National Act. They all want people off the benefit sanctions. They issued out 13,500 benefit sanctions so far, and despite this, people on the benefit has increased by 23,000. So they're failing in every
they're
way.
laying everybody off as well.
Exactly. The economy is, plunging into a recession. We're seeing like Australian politicians saying, oh, New Zealand did this and we shouldn't do that because they're in a recession now. We're going to take it. This is where we are at the moment. We're seeing the total failure of their pro-ruling class policies. And this needs to be discussed as well. And there's also a lot of blame to be laid on the previous government, which assumes the role of the left-wing alternative,
Such as it is.
and then listens to their corporate lobbyist chief of staff or other lobbyists and consultancies and all that, creates business advisory groups as if business doesn't have enough say in government yet. And they will take, the first engagement of Chris Hipkins after he was sworn in as prime minister was a pilgrimage to the Auckland Chamber of Business to bow his knee to the real rulers of this country. This is not good enough. And this is why the people, said, okay, if this is what the left is, let's try out these nut jobs.
It's really important to draw that line, right? Between right-wing politicians not being called up for personal failings and cover-ups and horrific culture within their organizations. It's not necessarily because media organizations are complicit in those things, although who fucking knows at this point. It's predominantly because they don't want to put power at risk when those powerful people are the way in which these incredibly extractive and destructive policies are being implemented. They can't go after David Seymour for like the Tim Jago stuff and for the culture within the ACT Party, because that might ruin the government. And if they did that, then they wouldn't get this fucking recession they want. They wouldn't get this destruction of public services they want. And to everyone saying, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory, no one's really doing that shit. The media aren't talking to people. I don't give a shit. Like, they don't need to. That's what I mean about the institutions just being moved in this direction. It's a structural problem as much as anything else. Although there are more and more individuals within these systems who are more than happy to pin their flags to the mast, who are also themselves quite rabidly fascist, honestly, in the way that they approach some of these ideas. And that is particular among opinion writers. I think less so among reporters, although, again, there are really clear examples of that. And frankly, if you're a journalist within these organizations and your media outlet is like propping up these people doing overtly racist, bigoted, fascistic opinion content, like every liberal's favorite metaphor, if there's one Nazi at a table of 10 people, there are 10 Nazis there, right? Like, fucking eat it, especially the way that you like try to use that to attack left-wing organizing. Get fucked.
Now, if I can give
wait, before you weigh in, Josephine, you need to go. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll catch you on another one.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say one last thing before I go. Death to US Empire. Thank you. I'll catch you at the next episode whenever I'm on. Thank you so much.
Kia ora, Josephine.
Kia ora. Yeah, if I can give like the the gentlest good faith reach to the media community, because we I don't want to appear like I'm bashing on them too much. I'm mostly baffled. I'm mostly confused by
That's
this
fair.
sort of
That's fair.
omerta, this agreement of silence. But I think on a certain level, I do understand it from a place of self-preservation, because I think there is, and maybe this is all there is to it, is that it is kind of a frightening time to be a righteous journalist, to be a good journalist, to be a truth-telling journalist. It is a frightening time. You look at we talked about Ali, but also like Richard Medhurst in Austria.
Yeah.
They're just getting arrested, and all they're doing is reporting on Palestine. They're not doing anything controversial. They're not saying anything particularly controversial. They're just talking about the facts of what is happening in West Bank and Gaza, and the police are coming to their house and arresting them.
Let's not forget what happened to Mick Hall here in New Zealand, even before all of this kicked off, right?
And losing your job is one thing, and that's a reasonable fear. Losing your income is a scary thought, but it's becoming increasingly clear that the supposed international rules-based order, the West, the liberal West, the place of freedom of speech, is no longer interested in that, because Germany, Austria, Switzerland are now arresting, deporting, and jailing journalists for talking about reality, for just talking.
United Kingdom detained Medhurst as well, I believe.
Yeah, and I don't know if we are close to seeing that here in New Zealand. But if these other countries that we often take our cultural cues from are doing it, it seems only a matter of time before we start thinking about, hey, maybe we will do that too. Maybe we'll just start locking these guys up if they're causing too much trouble for us.
Yeah, I get it. But also, like, early warning sign, right? Like, come on, organize. Like, start putting pressure on the people who want to pull us in this direction. Don't just roll over. Like,
that's the thing. Yeah, we're allowed. That's, and I guess my like good faith attempt at saying, okay, if that's what's going on, that's understandable. My exhortation would be, we need to be organizing together and pushing back on that. We need more journalists to be getting in that face and going, I'm not actually afraid of what you're going to do to me. I'm willing to put myself at risk. Because it's not, I mean, there's not just fear of deportation and imprisonment. You know, there is murder. Like, we have been watching journalists and whistleblowers for the last couple of years just getting murdered routinely. That's not a conspiracy. The Boeing whistleblowers, two Boeing whistleblowers last year, abruptly, having said, I have no intention of killing myself, but people have been threatening my life, suddenly died, and it was just ruled a suicide. And it was very clearly not. It was very clearly Boeing is killing people. The organization that creates the planes that you fly on when you go to another country kills people. It's part of their business program. It's part of the way that they operate. It kills the people who are blowing the whistle about their planes exploding. And so that is the world that we currently live in, and it's unvarnished. Because I think for a long time we've always been like, oh, it's a bit worrisome that the stuff sort of seems to happen, and it was hard to sort of draw lines between it, and you looked crazy when you were doing it. But now the veneer is coming off, and it's very clear. And when that veneer comes off, fear increases. It's not like a relief to people. People don't go, oh, thank goodness, now all the truth's coming to light. People go, holy shit, it's so much worse than I thought. And so when people are afraid, they go to, unfortunately, not usually good organizing places. They don't usually go to a place of solidarity, of going, we need to band together and fight back against this. They typically go, we need to panic and look after ourselves and tend to our own gardens. It's the Rousseau's stag hunt sort of analogy. We need to be organizing to catch a deer, but everyone's off chasing rabbits. And I think that would be my sort of like, I don't want to be too negative. I don't want to be sort of constantly critical. I would encourage people to say, you need to be more organized. You need to be thinking about this in terms of, I'm not going to fight back against this on my own, and I can't. Like, no one of us can fight back against this on our own. Luigi Mangione aside, we do need a sort of coordinated struggle. We need to be working together and supporting each other and building networks for when the boot drops, for when these things fall to pieces. Because America, they weren't ready. Their unions are in a shambles. Their social institutions have been getting gutted for years. They just weren't prepared for what's happening to them now, and they're in disarray. And I hope to God that they're able to pull themselves together. And
at least they have union funds. At least they have unions that are like structurally intact. You know, like
New Zealand. That's not to say New Zealand's better off.
Yeah,
New Zealand is better off in that the boot hasn't dropped as hard here. Nearly as hard, and it might yet.
I think I want to be clear as well. Like, we can hear a lot from particular media poll commentators and people in that space in the gallery and the like about the bubble that all us on social media and like just hanging out with our left-wing friends and like not really understanding reality and actually middle New Zealand and Waitakere man and the like. They've bubbled themselves to a far greater extent than any of us on social media are. And especially for those of us doing media stuff. I don't know about you, Oliver, but I follow like everything. I'm definitely not just looking at left-wing stuff because a large part of my role is to keep an eye on what's happening across the spectrum, right? Like there is absolutely no way. Like I block a lot of people, but it's mostly like sock puppets who are yelling slurs at me. But I feel like part of the issue here is that media is set up in such a way that the reporters on the ground are just facing constant abuse from these sock puppets and from the like much more extreme radical right wingers. They're not protected by their leadership. That's intentional. They want people to feel that way to the extent that when there's light criticism from the left, the wagons are immediately circled and it's treated as abuse. And I just want to say, like, if reporters did suddenly start taking a much harder view on the most hated man in politics, David Seymour, I want to be very clear about this. There is polling to show this. He is despised. The public will be behind you. People will rally around you. And, this is something that Guy Williams piece showed. Like, the response to that on social media has been fucking huge. In contrast, the spin-off today released an article doing some commentary about Guy Williams not being a proper journalist, saying that Guy Williams was the one humiliated, and that David Seymour was too, like, smart for him, and bemoaning that no one knows what real journalism is anymore. Like, how do you, as a spin-off, as a, like, preeminent, like, ostensibly liberal media space, how do you come out from that, seeing that video, and take a swing at Williams and the public and defend David Seymour? It's actually fucking wild if you get a chance to read it. What do they say? Like they say that Williams was publicly humiliated by Seymour, like essentially saying that Seymour was just too good for him. Like it's just pathetic, honestly. Like, and if this is what like the editorial level believes about the state of media, about holding people to account, even if ham-fisted, like no one's gonna say that Guy Williams fucking nailed it, right? I don't have that much hope. Yeah, it's really frustrating.
The criticism of Williams being he didn't do a very good job as a journalist, and it's like, well, when you say a good job, do you mean he should have been like obsequious and quiet? Because that's kind of what I'm seeing from most journalists. Yeah. Like he obviously was like a little bit emotional, and it's like, well, maybe you should be. Like these are times when I feel like that's kind of warranted. Like that anger, that rage is actually, it's reflective of the electorate.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. Like David Seymour is hated. The only reason he has any run of the place is because National won the election and Chris Luxon is a fucking muppet. And so he's just getting run roughshod over by his two deputies who run the show.
And then the media just allow it to happen. And they don't challenge them. And that's one of the things with Williams' stand-up is he was just calling it out, like you're framing stuff up as being divisive, but you're the one doing the division. And I really need people in media to understand that the objectivity, both sides, approach has been thoroughly hacked by the far right. And that's not even taking into account like who media owners are, right? Like let's be really charitable and say like doesn't matter who owns the media, it doesn't matter that the owner of stuff is part of a right-wing pressure group because they're not giving direct kind of instruction to the journalists, and journalists get get on with it. I'm sorry, but there've been 40 years of the far right and just right-wingers and neocons learning to hack your model so that when you do what you assume is objectivity, you ensure that they're getting a message out that is in entirely bad faith and puts you offside with the public, that bundles you into a class grouping with the powerful. This is the intent of it. It's so frustrating to like, and I'm not this is not new. This is not a normal, this is not like I'm not saying anything that's like breakout, right? Like, this has been studied and analyzed for fucking years. This is how they operate. Like, and in that same stand-up, David Seymour is swinging at the average media. He's constantly saying like reporters are fuck-ups. And what do they do? Just hold the fucking mic in front of him and let him mouth off and don't challenge him. And it's just not good enough at this stage. You're handmaidens, like, or is that too? Yeah. Anyway.
No, I get it. It's it would be nice. It would be nice to see the anger of the electorate more reflected in, I guess, public broadcast, but it's just not there.
Or just not, it doesn't even need to be reflected, right? Just ask the question. Just say, in the same way that David Seymour always says, can you give me an example of that? You have to say to him, no, give me an example of that. Okay. And then you see when that happens as well, he'll go, oh, I don't have that on hand right now. Like that's what immediately gives the lie to the way he's trying to frame stuff. But as I've said as well, this is all in service of the extractive, like capitalist state. Like what's happening in that sphere isn't as important as what's being implemented. And the reason that there is this layer of protection for right-wing ideologues at the top of the pile is because it allows them to get on with the job.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, that's another episode.
I think so.
Keep connecting, everybody. Keep talking to people. Keep putting pressure, and particularly keep an eye on what's happening in the United States, because it is the playbook for what happens in other Western countries. We can look at that and go, okay, this is the early warning signal. If that was to happen here, if they were to use the same strategy here, what protection would we have from it?
Absolutely none, and that's the thing. Because America is the testing ground, and what I was trying to say before was like, while America has been completely unprepared for this, and has been completely just overrun by it, New Zealand is even less prepared than America was, and we're existing by the grace of God right now, by the fact that they haven't, our like conservative sphere have not yet realized just how easily they can just walk over Kiwis if they wanted to. There is a coterie, there is a cohort of people in New Zealand who I think would be adequately equipped to stand up against it, and it's the people who are doing these Palestine marches. It's the people who are turning out for the anti-treaty principles bill.
It's Maori.
Yeah, in large part, our natural sort of aversion to the institutions of government is proving to be mostly useful right now. We can and we should be getting more organized, and we need to be sort of ready for it rather than just sort of like allowing ourselves to be sidelined when it does inevitably come home. Because there's no guarantee that the next election won't be run by these same lunatics who are currently running the asylum right now. There's no guarantee. These guys could win another term and continue just gutting our infrastructure, implementing brutal austerity. And we are not ready for when they finally go, hey, Elon Musk got away with performing a Hitler salute during a rally in America and no one even batted an eye. Maybe we can start doing that too.
If you've enjoyed this episode, like, share, subscribe, let people know that there is media out there that is analyzing and critiquing this shit correctly. Thank you for joining me, Oliver.
Pleasure.
And thank you for listening. That's been another episode of 1 of 200 Current Events. Patreon link in the summary. Please give us some money because it's what keeps us going. And we'll catch you next week. See ya.
If artificers are, then I'm living a pointless life, but learning all your lessons. Fucking politics, there's no distinction. The road's upon now. It's paid with good intentions, and I'll admit that I'm at a loss for what to say when they quote this as a cost we ought to stay. 'Cause I live amongst the people.